Okay, so next up, we're going to evaluate some logarithms without using a calculator. So this is really crucial. You have to learn how to do this without the calculator. So here we go. We've got log base 4 of 64. Now, in order to evaluate this, I'm going to kind of think about it like an equation. So I'm looking to find out what value would go here. What is the x? And if I were to rewrite that now in my exponential form, then I would say, well, that would be 4 to what power is equal to 64. And when I write it like that, it's a little bit easier to think about. I just have to figure out 4 times itself, how many times makes 64? And in that case, I would have 3. Okay, so if I go back to the beginning now, remember we put that x in there. It wasn't actually a part of the problem. So if I got rid of that, I could say, well, log base 4 of 64 is equal to, and then whatever I got from here would be my answer. So 3 is the answer. All right, looking at the next one there, I've got log base 9 of 1. So once again, I'm thinking about it this way. I'm thinking about, well, if it said equals x, so then I would rewrite it as 9 to the power x equals 1. And this one's a little bit more difficult to think about unless you already know that anything to the power 0 is equal to 1. So in this case, it would be x is 0. So for log base 9 of 1, well, that would be 0. Okay, now for that third one, log base 3 of 81. So I'd be saying 3 to what power is 81? Now think about it for a second, see if you can come up with it. 3 times itself, how many times makes 81? Well, that would be 4. All right, so those were kind of basic. Let's do a few that are a little more interesting. Same concept though, so log base 36 of 6. So we'd be saying 36 to what power is 6? Now you're probably thinking, well, there's some kind of relationship between 6 and 36. What is it? The relationship hopefully you're coming up with is that 36 is 6 times 6. So that would mean that this side over here would be like 6 squared. So if I wanted to undo that so I could get 6 by itself, I'd need to be thinking about a square root. Square root of 36 is 6. But of course, I can't write a square root. I had to put something in as the power instead. So we learned in the last unit that there is a way to rewrite a square root as a power, and that would be as a 1/2 power. So log base 36 of 6 would be 1/2. All right, let's make it even more interesting. Log base 1/2 of 8. So that would be 1/2 to some power equals 8. Okay, so I'm taking a fraction, trying to raise it to some kind of a power and get 8 as a result. So let's see, if I did 1/2 to the second power, that would give me 1/2 times 1/2, which is 1/4, which is further away from 8. So maybe I'd need to go the other way. Let's explore a little bit. So we said 1/2 to the second power is 1/4. So that's further from 8. So instead of going up, because 1/2 to the 1 power is 1/2, what if I went down? So what if I did 1/2 to the 0 power? Well, we talked about that just a minute ago. Anything to the 0 power is 1. So that's a little closer to 8, but it's still kind of far away. So let's keep going with our pattern here. So we went 2, then 1, then 0 for our powers. So the next in line there with that pattern would be a -1. So 1/2 to the -1 power. -1 power just means take the reciprocal of the base. So the reciprocal of 1/2 is 2. So now we're getting a lot closer to 8. So looks like we're on the right path. So let's keep going. So let's do 1/2 to the -2 power. So the negative power means take the reciprocal. So that would be 2. and then raised to whatever power is there. So 2 to the 2 would be 4. And we are really, really close now. So if I keep going, my next logical step in the powers would be a -3. So that would be take the reciprocal of 1/2, which is 2, and then raise that to the third power, which would give me 8. So the power that makes this work is -3. And therefore, log base 1/2 of 8 would have to be a -3. Okay, now this is an important distinction here. If you've got a fraction and you need to turn it into a whole number, or vice versa, if you've got a whole number and you need to turn it into a fraction with logarithms, that means that your number over here, the number that that logarithm is going to end up being negative. So that's important to remember. I think that'll make things a lot easier. So last one over here, we've got log base 3 of 1/27. So we'd be thinking to ourselves, 3 to what power is 1/27? Okay, now using what I learned before, I've got a whole number that I'm trying to turn into a fraction. So rather than start with positive numbers for my power, I'm just going to start with negative numbers and see where it takes me. So exploring a little bit, 3 to the -1 would be 1/3. 3 to the -2 would be the reciprocal of 3, which is 1/3, and then squared. So that would be 1/9. And then 3 to the -3 power, that would be the reciprocal of 3, which is 1/3, and then cube that. 1/3 times 1/3 times 1/3 would be 1/27. So that's our answer. Our x has to be -3 for this one. So that means log base 3 of 1/27 would be -3. Okay, once again, we had a whole number base. We needed to make the argument a fraction. So that means that the answer that we have over here has to be a negative number. Okay, now there are a few problems for you to practice on the Google form. Give it a try.